Hey guys, it's Andrew and I'm back with Andy. So today we're going to go through 6 brain hacks to learn effectively and learn anything faster. So I was reading a article on Fast Company and there were 6 tips. Let's go through the article. So the first tip was to teach someone or just pretend to. So this tip is around, just learning with the intention to teach so that you're kind of pressured to, yeah, learn it and actually put the concepts into your own words and um, understand it better. Have you thought about this tip before, Andy?
Yeah, I have. And I think that the main kind of idea behind that tip is to get to a point where you're comfortable teaching someone in terms of details. So a lot of times I would learn something and I would think that I would have enough of a grasp of what I'm learning in order to understand it. But when I teach someone, especially someone that is really interested in the material and asks a lot of questions, like that combined with the fact that you have to explain something to someone that may not know the things that you know in terms of your background really tests whether or not you know everything in detail.
I'm reading this article right now. When teachers prepare to teach, they tend to seek out key points and organize information into a coherent structure. And yeah, like when students do that as well and turn uh, the key points into a coherent structure for themselves, they learn more effectively. So yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting and I do agree.
When you say coherent structure, what exactly do you mean by that?
Having a good order of information that you understand the logical flow of one idea to the next and how each idea associates to a new idea that you're learning. So understanding this concept as a whole, it helps you get a big picture of what you're learning so that you know where each detail fits in your grand scheme of learning.
I see. So the second point is more or less saying like understand the big picture of things.
Hmm. Right.
Okay.
Second point is to learn in short bursts of time. So, according to this article, it's talking about how um, learning in short bursts of time, it allows you to learn the beginning bit of your learning and the end bit of your learning, and how your brain needs a break in order to process information. Anything less than 30 minutes is not enough, but anything over 50 is too much information for the brain to process. So they recommend a 5 to 10 minute break after each work or studying session. I've found that in my experience, yeah, like my performance and my concentration over time, it can decrease after about an hour or so, like maybe around 50 minutes. So that's when probably my body is telling me, yeah, go take a break because I need time to process it. Have you done similar in terms of having a regular break schedule between your work sessions?
So I'm a pretty odd case when it comes to this, and a lot of these tips I think are like when I hear tips like this, it's with the context of everyone's different, so some things might work and some things might not. But for me personally, I find that sometimes when I go, I just go, and I kind of just go until I think I need to take a break, and I've never really like extensively thought about how long it takes me to go until I feel tired. And that might not be healthy, but I think this also depends on your interest in something. Like obviously if you're more interested in something, then you're more compelled to do it. And I find that productivity momentum is a thing where you just need to take that first little step, and then it will, like, keep on snowballing. You'll just keep on wanting to get more things done. So that's kind of the case with me. I know there's like other techniques or tactics out there, like the Pomodoro timer. I've actually tried the Pomodoro timer, which is like when you work for 25 minutes and then take a break for 5 minutes. But I just find that that's not really my style. I kind of just like to work for a long period of time, and then when I feel really tired, or when I feel that brain fog, or when I get to that point of like, oh, I'm reading the same sentence like 3 times and I don't really understand what's happening, like that's kind of when I decide to take a break. And also I have various, I guess, like hacks, I guess you could call them, that I try to implement in order to make sure, in order to create an environment that is suited for productivity. So, for example, sometimes I meet up with friends, and that kind of motivates me to just keep on going. And then we just, we take short breaks whenever we get really tired. And sometimes I uh, read what I'm studying out loud, and that keeps me mentally awake. So I'm not just reading in my mind all the time. I'm also speaking it out loud too. So yeah, I know that's pretty common. Like there's a lot of sayings out there that, you have to work for X amount of hours, or there's like some sort of function out there that dictates the longest amount of time you can spend focused based on your age or something like that. Like I've seen those things and I don't really follow them. I kind of just do what feels right for me, which is a very, broad and general piece of advice. But as with all things, I guess, just trying it and through experience, you kind of adapt.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, on that topic, I think it's really important to understand your own learning style and use what works for you. And there are so many different ways of studying and so many techniques, but it's up to yourself to like gather which one works well for me. And like some things might work well, some things might not work well. The third point is taking notes by hand. So um, this article talks about Princeton and UCLA finding that when students took notes by hand, they listened more actively and were able to identify more important concepts. And they also contrasted it to taking notes on a laptop, where it just leads to mindless transcription and an opportunity for distraction. So um, actually, I've experienced this too. When I wrote down notes in university, I had to actively think which are the most important points that I should write down, because I know I can't write everything down. So that kept my brain going. And I found that it was more active learning. What's your experience like with writing down with hand for note taking and learning?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, I also thought the same thing about like writing down notes by hand is definitely better in terms of like memory intention, because you kind of have to filter. And I do kind of still agree with that to some extent, but over time I've started to prefer technology more. And I think this is highly dependent on the degree that you are in, and also the courses that you take. Yeah, so in some classes, I think that it depends on the speed at which the prof kind of teaches. For fast classes, I think it's almost essential that you import the slides, which are hopefully posted to something like OneNote, and then you just write on them, because you can't, like, it's so hard to take notes that fast when the prof goes super fast. So in that case, it's really essential to have digital notes. But in other classes, I've noticed that it's helped me when I write down things on paper, because again, like you said, you just have to filter out what is important and what is not. The reason I've started to prefer technology over old school notes is just because of convenience. Like I find that a lot of times I kind of like keeping all my notes. I know that people throw them away, but a lot of times I find that I'm carrying around a lot of notebooks, or at the end of the term, I just like leave them in a box in my basement or something. And it's just nice to have everything on your laptop that you can just download, or everything in your Google Drive, or everything in like your folders, etc., uploaded to whatever cloud you choose to upload it to. So that's kind of why I prefer digital more. But I definitely do see the benefits of handwritten notes.
Hmm. So then there are pros and cons of using digital note taking and paper note taking.
Yes, yes.
Um, yeah, and for conceptual questions, it's best to take handwritten notes. But then for like fact heavy and um, maybe more memory things, you use digital means. Do you think that's
Yeah,
the case?
yeah. I think that's about right. I think the skill that you gain when you write handwritten notes, which is a filter that you improve every time you take handwritten notes, is important. Like I think having that filter, having that ability to know when something actually matters, and in the context of a course, this would be, is this important for the final? Basically, at the end of the day, right? Like sometimes there's like, oh man, I'm really interested in this, so I'll write it down. But in the context of a course, that's what it all boils down to. Having that filter is important. Having that skill is really important, and this is also an essential skill for life too. Like knowing when someone tells you something and you're asking them a question, like it's really important for you to be able to filter out what part of what they just said is important to your situation, so you can ask questions about those parts and like kind of filter out the rest. So yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like especially with conceptual questions, again, it's good to have that filter as a skill.
And the fourth point, it's on mental spacing. They talk about this concept where you can water a lawn once a week for 90 minutes or 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And they compared that and found spacing out the watering during the week will keep the lawn greener. They recommend a study tip where you space out your learning over time so that you can process it better and retain the information. So even though you're spending the same amount of time, you learn better spaced out rather than cramming it all together. What do you think?
It's more ideal too because you just get more opportunities to learn things, especially with final exams. I know that cramming is pretty common, but if from my experience, after quite a bit of cramming situations, there were a few instances where I decided, let's not do that again. Let's try to space things out, and that worked a lot better because you just have more opportunities to review more material, and that in and of itself gives you, more opportunities to more opportunities to review what you learned.
The fifth
So
tip, they say, is to take a study nap. And they say there was a experiment held in France where there was a Swahili translation of 16 French words, and the group that did sleep and take a little nap recalled 2.5 words more than the other group. In my experience, like sometimes during the day, if it's quite long, I did take afternoon naps like during the day so that I can recover some energy and go on to the next part of my day. I did find it helpful to recharge so that I can focus on my like second part of the day. But Andy, I'm not sure what your experience is with naps. Do you think
yeah,
it's
so
necessary, or do you think?
napping, yeah, napping is something that again is situation and person specific, because it can be pretty dangerous in the sense that sometimes I would take a nap and then I would wake up like several hours later and I would be like, oh crap, that should not have been a nap. That was several hours. But there have been other times, and I there have been other times where I have, taken naps throughout the day, but that was just because I felt really, really, really tired. And I think when that's the case, that's kind of like your body telling you to take a nap. But yeah, like even the act of laying down, I find that in and of itself is calming. So I agree with that to some extent, but I will throw in the caveat there that if you take naps that aren't super controlled, um, just be careful because you don't want to be cramming for a final and then, you know tell yourself, oh, I want to take a nap, and then you take a nap and you accidentally sleep like the whole night, and then you wake up and your final is in a few hours. So
A lot of people do cram, but like as to point number 4, use the power of mental spacing. Because yeah, you're studying, the time you use to study may be the same, but then if you cram it all in one session, that is a lot less effective than spacing it all out. The last point, number 6, is change it up. Using a different method to learn something, like looking at a new concept from a different perspective. The example they gave here is sometimes when you explore new perspectives, you might see that you've missed a blind spot, or you learn different information that could be very helpful to your understanding.
So I have a couple of practical points to add to this. Number one is something that I would do when studying is switch study spots. And I feel like changing it up doesn't just have to apply to the material that you're learning. I think it could also apply to several other things too, one of them being where you study. Sometimes I would study in one area. I'm sure a lot of dorms have residences, and residences have like a ground floor, and on those ground floors, there's usually like a lounge which you can study. There was an occasion where I studied at one lounge for a couple hours, and then when I got bored or when I got like tired or when I didn't feel like studying anymore, I would just go to the next lounge. And I think that like sense of like, oh, this is new, right? It almost feels fun almost. So that's like a practical tip that I kind of have in terms of studying and changing things up is instead of going to the same place you always go to, try different places out. And that might help you, stay productive in terms of like studying and help you keep on going.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great tip, Andy. Um, like for me, I actually found, yeah, like sometimes I would study in buildings, and then sometimes like just outside, even like changing up the surroundings. It also changes like your mood and atmosphere. So it also changes the way you take in information. So definitely that's a really good tip. That's a wrap for today. And thank you, Andy, for the good discussion. You can find Andy's links in the description. Thank you, everyone out there, for watching. And yeah, hope you enjoyed today's video. Comment below on which tip you found most helpful, or actually add a tip that you found helpful for studying. Smash the like button and click subscribe for next videos. We'll see you guys soon.